And let's see, so Plato, Aristotle's the one right next to him, and he's in earth colors, so water and dirt, or earth, right? And he's carrying his ethics. And notice he's pointing sort of down instead of up. He's substance. Aristotle's the abstract ideas. Aristotle's stuff. Pop-Tarts again. Good stuff. So what else do we have on this picture? And there's Diogenes. Notice this is an interpretation by the author of this page, who says who these different individuals are. I don't know that anyone knows absolutely for sure who they are. They're just going by iconic associations. It's just the Slavy way he's sitting there. Fortunately, they at least have him dressed. And here's an interesting paragraph on Diogenes. A cynic philosopher, a student of Antisthenes. Antisthenes is famous for trying to stop sniffles. Antisthenes?
Antihistamine.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you for laughing.
No,
My jokes are so much better when somebody laughs. You know,
no, that was a good one though.
All right. We don't know who the heck 8 to 10 is according to this person. A young student, number 12. And then we get Plotinus. We'll be looking at Plotinus a little bit. Yes, Ellie?
Have you heard the story about Diogenes and Aristotle about the simplest definition of a man?
No.
So Aristotle was asked, what is the simplest definition of a man? And because he hadn't yet heard of kangaroos or other things like that, he said a featherless biped.
Yes, I heard that one. Yeah.
And so Diogenes walks into his school
With a chicken, a plucked chicken.
with a plucked chicken and says, "Behold, Aristotle's man."
I've heard of that plucked chicken business. I didn't hear the association with Diogenes, but sure, why not? I don't know if Diogenes ever met Aristotle, though. Interesting question. Lots of stuff. There is a story about Diogenes meeting Alexander the Great. You heard this one? Mm-hmm. Where Alexander comes up and says, "This is the famous Diogenes. What can I do for you?" And Diogenes looked up at him, and Alexander had apparently blocked the sun when he came up to him. And so he said, "You could get out of my sun." And the general next to Alexander thought, "Oh, that's the end of Diogenes." But instead, Alexander said, "If I weren't Alexander, I would want to be Diogenes." So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And Diogenes the Cynic, what is the Cynic philosophy? Well, in some respects, it's not really clear that there was a specific philosophy. It's just that since you can't know anything, there's no point in getting excited about anything. So they're cynical in the sense that we still use today, that you don't believe that, you don't believe that. It's a little different than skepticism. Skeptics tend to have more of an argument with regard to specific things. But the cynic is just cynical in general. And by the way, the word comes from the dog. And so in a sense, it's the dog philosophy. And if you think our dogs kind of, just as Diogenes says, he calls himself the dog philosopher because he begs for everything. And he's happy when people give him stuff. I guess he even likes being petted. I don't know. And if they don't give him something, he barks at them and might even bite them, etc. So he's kind of the dog in that sense. And if you think, and this is the direction I want to go today, is that the post-Aristotelians are not only after Aristotle, but influenced by Aristotle. And as a result, instead of thinking the way Plato did, where the goal of life is to become part of the good, to eventually be released from this prison house of the body, the soul, right? Once you get the soul released, you're once again in the abstract ideal world, which, by the way, in the Christian period will become heaven, right? And just to be released into basically heaven that way. That's the goal of life, to be, prepared for heaven, to be as pure as possible, so that, in a sense, it's easier for our soul to be released, etc. And theoretically, of course, the closer we are to that, even in life, the more happy we ought to be, according to Plato. With Aristotle, though, it's very different, because substance is all there is, and the soul is the activity of the body. And so your soul is connected to the body. So without the body, no soul, essentially, right? The point of eudaimonia, how to live the best life, that we were talking about at the very end, right? For Aristotle is, to have a sufficient enough stuff that you can have a good life physically, but also have a good social life, so that you're, where man is also the political animal for Aristotle, the zoon politikon, which means zoon comes from zoo, and politikon, well, it doesn't come from zoo. Zoo comes from zoon, which are all the animals, right? And politikon are the political animal. So we're the social animal, as well as the Homo sapiens, the man, the knower, right? And if you think of it, for Aristotle, the good life is, okay, having all the stuff you need so that you can basically go on to have a good social life, and a good social life so that you essentially can study philosophy, right? So yes, absolute bias, absolutely. And that's because Aristotle liked doing that stuff. And if you were asking somebody else who likes pizza, what's the best thing in life? Having pizza. What's the best thing in life? Having good friends, having a nice Wednesday night evening, time to talk about, everything. Or, like Aristotle, if you get to that, the best thing in life is sitting down with a good book and really learning all kinds of new exciting things. Or coming to philosophy class and learning new exciting things. Or listening to Jordan Peterson on the internet, talking about things. That excitement. I mean, it's not as much fun if you're hungry. It's not as much fun if you're cold and hungry. But if you're at least fed enough and you're warm enough, and then you can watch that. Wow, that seems to be the highest point of being human, is being in that kind of a situation for Aristotle. But by Aristotle asking these kinds of questions, what's the good life, what's eudaimonia, he opens up the answer to people who disagree with that, and you get people like Diogenes, who feel that the best kind of life is the life of a dog, basically, in the sense that you're not stressed out in any way, because you're just totally relaxed. You're not worried about where your next meal is going to come from. You're not worried about, what clothes you have compared to the other person, or what car you're driving. Are you driving the best car? You're not worried about all that kind of stuff. You're not really even worried about your children, because you don't have any that you know of. That's...
Unless you were treated badly as a dog, animal abuse or something, then you wouldn't want to be a dog.
Yeah, but he's a free dog. He's a dog that lives in the streets.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any owner. He is an owner.
That would
and
be
they die.
stressful.
Yeah.
Where does his next meal come from if he lives
Yes,
in the
that would be
street?
stressful.
Oh, he just kind of waited.
I'm-
So people gave him food, and people loved him so much that they just gave him food. It was weird.
I'm not saying I'm a cynic. I'm not saying I agree with Diogenes. I'm just saying, and please don't shoot me, for this. And when I introduce these different people, I try to introduce them the best I can to give them a fair show, right? But frankly, I think he's wrong about everything.
But this main philosophy is living warriors, right? This example is extreme.
Yeah, he's an extreme, not worried about anything. So that's actually why I would start with him, because he's way on this one side. If you say over here is the answer to the question of what is eudaimonia, it's this kind of answer for the cynic.
Someone who don't really only live in that philosophy for what's the word now. If they have someone to give them food, they still need security.
Right.
They need security and safety. You can't live like that unless you have can't think of word. But it's not a feasible life because it's not so providing any security to counting on everyone else. Like
Yeah,
you said,
it makes you
if
wonder.
you're a bad dog, if you're treated poorly, you're still a dog. You can't really fix anything.
Makes you wonder what kind of dogs were running around where Diogenes.
Privilege was the word I was looking for. It's
Privilege.
really only sort of life they do live from privilege.
My dogs have a good time. Every once in a while, they get upset with me because they really want to go bark at Milo, who's next door. And Sean, the guy that lives there, is an emergency worker, and he has shift work, and I never know when he's sleeping. And his bedroom window's right next to the spot where they would bark. And so I'm always trying to keep her from barking over at Milo, his dog, which is, it's a constant. I can't just let them out. I have to go out with them. So that means I have to wear clothing because, neighbors would get upset, if you run out, in your underwear, So I, put on clothes, boots, and then I go out with them, even in a fenced-in yard, because I'm trying to keep them from barking. So she gets upset with me over that. But we have good communications. By the way, there was an interesting article in the paper this morning talking about the dogs in Turkey and Syria where the earthquakes happened. They were all reacting minutes before the earthquake came. And so it brought up the question of, do animals know when things like that are, and I think it was in the Philippines where the animals all started running uphill before the tsunami came in. So, okay, but enough of the dog life. You experiment with that and see, if you would like to live the life of the dog. There's some really racy stories about Diogenes living in a barrel and things, and I'm thinking, this is basically the homeless life, really, and we do have some people that seem to really like that, and you think, no, we need to give them housing and stuff, and they resist it. But
would he be considered more of like a nihilist or like an existentialist?
I wouldn't say either. Just both of them, I think, represent kind of a future philosophical choice that wouldn't have been available to him. But I don't know. We don't really know that much about him. But I did mention, I think, earlier that one of the authors who's written about Jesus of Nazareth in his book, Honest to Jesus, that was Robert Funk, believes that Jesus, as a follower of St. John the Baptist, who dresses the same way, has no possessions, recommends against it. It looks an awful lot like John the Baptist was a cynic, and that, as a result, Jesus would have been thought of as a cynic. Many of the parables that he tells can be interpreted that way, why do you worry? about what you're going to eat. The birds of the air are taken care of by God, etc. Why do you worry what you're going to put on? The lilies of the field are dressed more beautifully than any of the daughters of Solomon, etc. I'm totally screwing up the biblical quotes, but I don't see anybody getting upset with me, so I guess I'm okay. I used to do better, but age, I don't know. Okay. As we kind of move along on a narrative scale, though, let's see if I can get to the next one. I would say was Epicurus. Let me just do this. Remember, sometimes when you're looking at a bust, they could have been damaged by people. It's just stone. By the way, the Greeks actually painted their white statues. The Romans didn't realize that, I guess, or maybe they did. Who knows? But when we look at statues in museums and things like that, we think just white marble, but actually they painted them. So they looked as realistic as possible.
Yeah, went to the Getty Museum once, like that really had like both sides, they kind of look at them. They're like almost like way more curly than the other. I guess you could say.
In any case, so Epicurus